Welcome to another episode of the I Am Undeniable podcast. What is up, guys? I am extremely excited to not only live stream this, but to really just drop a ton of value for each and every single one of you. And in today's episode, what I'm going to be talking about is how I went from literally no voice. I was so nervous to communicate with people, to speaking on international stages, to having a social platform. And I'm going to be literally discussing and telling you guys my journey throughout that process, how I discovered my voice, how I developed that confidence to vocalize who I am, and how you can essentially do that for yourself as well, right? So maybe you're someone who has also struggled to speak their own voice or maybe speak your own mind. It's like, well, how do you do that? Well, I'm going to be teaching you guys exactly how to do that today. And it's going to be very, very exciting. So if you're getting value, all I ask is to share the podcast with someone that could use it, to subscribe, help support the platform, and yeah, all that kind of good stuff. So let's really kind of jump into that. So if you don't know my story, kind of like where I started out, and it's one of the reasons why I really got into fitness coaching and really posting on social media, is I literally, I wouldn't say like had no confidence. Confidence didn't exist in my language. I would get so nervous to communicate to someone that I would be sweating buckets. I would be nervously like laughing to myself. Words wouldn't come out of my mouth. Like there was just no words. Nothing would spill out of my voice. And one of my goals was to eventually become an excellent speaker, speak on stages, and impact the world. Now, this is really, really important to understand for myself, right? Because like the moment I kind of made this decision, I actually made the decision when I was super young. So there was a moment in grade 3 where I felt like I had to change the world, right? I felt like I had to like take action towards that. So I had like these grand dreams that I made when I was that young. I made all these dreams, all of these like perspectives. I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do to help and change people. And then when I was in grade 11, I was in an English class. I was sitting beside one of my classmates. His name was Mark Bateman. And I remember his name very vividly in that moment, because like he was sitting next to me. Mark Bateman was a nice guy. And he was trying to talk to me the whole time when I was in this class, communicate to me, right? Just like, how am I going? And have that kind of connection just because we were sitting right next to each other, right? Makes total sense. Now, the thing is that I wanted to communicate back to him. I wanted to like develop that connection, whether it was a friendship or like with classmates. But the problem was I didn't know how to communicate it. I didn't know how to like speak words. And like not even just speak words, like thought I couldn't think. Like I was so frozen at the fact that someone was talking to me. I didn't know how to communicate back, and I would freeze and just had nothing to say. And that was like the whole semester, right? And for the majority of like my young life, I did not know how to communicate to people. I didn't even know how to speak or start a conversation off. And that eventually led to there was this girl in the class. I forget her name. I think it was Melissa. I think we swapped classes. Like we were doing some type of like Shakespeare or one of these books that we're learning. We're separating to different classes, and she wanted to be in a class with a bunch of her friends. And I didn't have a lot of friends back then. Any of my friends weren't in my English classes. So I said, yeah, you can totally take my class if you want to. And Mark Bateman sat there, was like, you should give him a hug, and smiled at me, right? So she's like, sure, I'll give you a hug. And I'm just sweating buckets, right? Not for the reason that I was nervous to get a hug from girls, but because of what, like the damage that I've gone through. Touching me was just not a thing. I didn't want to be touched by anyone. I didn't want to be touched by my parents. I didn't want to be touched by friends. I didn't want to be touched by girls, because touching equals danger. And what I actually learned from that moment was like, holy shit, I have to change this. If I don't learn how to talk to people, if I don't learn how to accept, any kind of physicality from anyone, especially the opposite sex, I'm not going to reach my goals. I'm never going to have an intimate relationship. I'm never going to be able to communicate for myself. And that was like a big realization for me. And like over the years, what I had to do was really learn to develop the skill of communication, how to speak my mind, how to communicate correctly to people. And of course, I'm not perfect, right? But how to like really communicate and speak out on what my opinion was. And it was honestly a massive struggle. It took me a very long time to learn how to speak, to learn how to speak on stages, to learn how to speak without sweating buckets, doing a class presentations, learning how to talk to the opposite sex, even just standing up for myself and telling people, no, that's not okay, was literally not a thing for me for a very long time. And in order to develop the skill set, there were three things that really helped me. The first one was to get in uncomfortable situations, which forced me to communicate and to be confrontational. Because the one thing I had was I was such a bad people pleaser that I couldn't confront anyone about literally anything. If someone said, eat my fries, I would say yes. And I don't want to share. I want my fries for myself. You know what I mean? So in order to develop this skill of confrontation, I got a job as a bouncer at a bar. It was National on 8th in Calgary. And the thing was, I worked in sales. I was a personal trainer. I could sell, but I was not very confrontational. I still needed to develop way more confidence and for that ability, for that skill set. So I got a job as a bouncer, and that really forced me to talk to people. So that was one of the things I did when I was in my 20s, was I got different jobs so I could learn different skills to force me in a position to learn as quickly as possible. Because my ultimate goal was to be where I'm at, to be an international bestseller author, to speak on international stages, to be active on social media, to grow a business. But I had to learn to communicate. So working as a doorman, as a bouncer, forced me to communicate with people and forced me to communicate with people in uncomfortable situations. Because when someone was intoxicated or drunk, it forced me to be like, no, that's not okay. You got to leave the bar. You got to do this. So it taught me a lot about how I have to confront people, but also how to de-escalate a situation, which also helped me in many other areas of my life. So, and I think that's very important, because I think a lot of people who have ambition, they want to quit their job so bad, but you need to look at your job as your situation as a learning opportunity to take that, to learn it and apply to a skill that you're going to be doing later in life. And that's what I did with being a doorman, is I wanted to learn this skill and take that communication aspect and apply it to things that I eventually wanted to do. So that was one of the major highlights that really helped me with communication. The second one was honestly going on a lot of dates. I went on a lot of dates over the last couple of years. And obviously I'm in a very loving and committed relationship. But I had to learn to get into uncomfortable situations, right? Communicating with other people and getting to know other people who I didn't know, taught me how to think about questions on the fly, how to get to know someone else, how to communicate, right? Again, how to be comfortable with the opposite sex and being touched, right? So what I did is I got into a lot of uncomfortable situations. And the thing was, I was a personal trainer and I was communicating with people, but I could never approach someone out in public, right? Or talk to someone or learn how to think of stuff on the fly. Because as a personal trainer, I was really just talking about fitness and nutrition, which I was already knowledgeable in. But what I really had to learn is okay, if I'm going to be speaking, if I'm going to be communicating on stages, what happens if someone's going to communicate to me or ask me a question that I'm not prepared with, right? So that really kind of helped me with that aspect. And the third one, which I think is the most important part, is personal development work, right? Doing the work that people avoid. And the work that people avoid isn't a morning routine. It's not just getting fit and going to the gym, right? Because getting fit and going to the gym did help with my communication, But the thing was, I was already working out before I learned how to communicate. Right? I already had confidence in that aspect before I learned how to communicate. I was on a bodybuilding stage posing in trunks before I learned how to communicate, right? So the work that I actually really, really made a difference for me was learning about shadow work, learning about inner child work, learning about like deep psychological work, right? And how to like target specific traumas that I have personally went through so I can communicate. Because the thing was, even though I did all this work in terms of different jobs, dating at the time when I learned to communicate with other people, the one aspect I was missing was that there was still anxiety and stress with communication, right? So I had to go deeper and work with like specific coaches, mental health coaches to target areas that I wasn't aware of. So I worked with like a lot of different therapists, shadow coaches, inner child coaches. Like I spent a significant amount of income when it came to developing the skill of communication. Because if I couldn't, communicate, well, I wouldn't be where I am today, right? So we did a tremendous amount of work over the years. And the result of that was I had no anxiety. I don't sweat. I don't feel any pressure when it comes down to communication, whether it's meeting a brand new person in person, going and communicating in a brand new group, speaking on social media like a podcast, YouTube video, being interviewed, or even speaking on international stages. I don't get nervous. I understand how powerful my voice can really be and how powerful my mind is when I can communicate those words and translate it to you. So that's how I went from going to have no voice to speaking on stages. And know this, no matter like where you are at within your own personal journey, you also have the opportunity to change it. You also have the opportunity to speak up for yourself. It's a matter of just taking action. All right, squad. I hope you guys got a ton of value out of this podcast episode. And we'll see you, I guess, later this week. Take care. Peace, love, and protein. And we'll chat with you soon.